Today, we're going to take a close look at the Pennsylvania Common Core state standards. I'll introduce you to them and their history. We'll discuss the implications for teaching, and you'll learn how to navigate the standards to be useful in your lesson planning, your goal setting, and your working with your students. This information will be very valuable moving forward in this class. Back in 2011, a group of literacy professionals in Pennsylvania created the Comprehensive Literacy Plan. One of the goals to creating this plan was not only to define literacy as it will be taught in Pennsylvania, but also to adapt the Common Core standards created by the United States and make them work for Pennsylvania education. The literacy professionals first created the definition of literacy for the state of Pennsylvania, also known as the state code. It's important that you notice that the line that says, similarly, students do not write writing, they use written words to express their knowledge and ideas and to inform or entertain others. We recognize that writing is not something that's done on its own. We do not write just to write. We write to communicate. It's also important that you recognize that in the state code, literacy is defined as these 6 areas of communication. And all teachers in school are using reading, writing, speaking, listening, visual representation, and viewing to help students in learning language arts through multiple classroom situations in all subject areas. After creating the definition of literacy, the literacy professionals then said, in order to create our standards, we're going to need 5 guiding principles. 1, literacy is a critical foundation for all learning and serves as a keystone for opportunity and success. Literacy begins at birth and continues through life. 2, student learning, motivation, and access to educational opportunities are increased when linguistic, cultural, and personal experiences are valued, understood, and represented. Consider that you have 20-something personalities in your classroom. All 20-something students have different linguistics. They have different places where their language comes from, different places they've learned their words, and different ways they've learned their words. They use different words. They have cultural differences, and they have personal experiences. Everyone comes to your classroom with these differences, and we need to recognize their importance and how they have shaped these students as humans. And once we understand that and recognize how to use these differences, we will be able to reach our individual students to help them to learn literacy. 3, there must be high expectations for all learners and a belief that all learners are capable of gaining literacy skills that enable them to be successful as adults. If we believe that everyone is going to learn to their best ability and to do their best, we will get them far. 4, evidence-based decision-making must be at the heart of all instructional decisions related to literacy development. Basically, this means that we're going to make all of our educational choices based on evidence. We're not going to just grab a book from the floor and say, sure, this will help me teach. We're going to have an evidence reason that will show that this is a good thing to do to be able to teach a concept. And finally, it's very important that educators continue their professional development as they teach literacy. The following pages list more specifics about the 5 guiding principles. You can pause to read and then hit unpause to move on to the next slide. After developing the guiding principles, the literacy professionals then created 6 essential elements of Pennsylvania Comprehensive Literacy Plan. They are: the literacy programs require a well-articulated, coherent set of goals based on standards as identified by the Department of Education, meaning that it's important that we take the standards that we're developing and we create goals for our students. Oral language is the foundation for literacy development. We must rely on the oral language that's spoken for students to become literate. Effective assessment is a key component. Assessment is an important part of helping teachers and students to create goals for learning, and therefore we must make sure that we find ways to assess effectively. Slides. And we'll talk about that in our assessment and evaluation section. Fostering engagement and academic resiliency are keys to developing literate students. We must engage our students. Differentiation of instruction is key to enhancing students' ability to learn. You're going to have 20-something different students in your classroom, and each of them is going to have different needs and interests and backgrounds, and we need to find ways to address them as necessary. All of the academic disciplines incorporate literacy instruction. Literacy works in every subject. We are teaching reading, writing, speaking, listening, visual representation and viewing in all areas of school, not just in a language arts block. Again, now these go into further details. So you can pause and read the 6 essential elements of Pennsylvania's Comprehensive Literacy Plan. As you look through the Pennsylvania Comprehensive Literacy Plan, the 6 essential elements are spread into all of the subject areas of English language arts and literacy. They are defined through a rationale, as in this is why we teach these areas, and then implications for best practice, which means these are methods in which we teach these areas. Next will be references and then additional resources. Use these throughout the semester as you're searching for ways to come up with mini lessons, short-term and long-term goals, as well as needing professional resources for more information. It's important to note that while the definition of literacy includes 6 main areas, the Pennsylvania Comprehensive Literacy Plan focuses on reading, writing, speaking and listening, and language. This list is specifically recognizing the 4 areas covered in the Pennsylvania standards. As an example of how the different areas are broken down, writing. First is the rationale. The focus on instruction and expectations are listed. And then as you page through the Pennsylvania Comprehensive Literacy Plan's writing area, you'll see implications such as daily writing, writing for a variety of purposes, modeling and direct instruction, using the writing process to produce and improve writing, and providing opportunities for research using technology. These implications are the ways in which we teach writing. The Pennsylvania Comprehensive Literacy Plan goes into much more detail. The same is for speaking and listening and all the other areas of ELA. Now let's take a look at the Common Core state standards. They were created by the U.S. government in order to give a baseline for what is expected for students to do as they go through schooling. I like to look at the standards as a checklist. The checklist has many, hundreds even, of different standards that students should be able to do and are expected to be able to do by the end of each school year. They show growth and they mark proficiency. We're going to be taking a close look at the Pennsylvania state standards, but just for this video, I want you to look right here at the code because it's important that you understand how to decipher the code of the Common Core, Pennsylvania Core standards. The Pennsylvania standards are coded, and it's important that you recognize how to read a standard code. So here's how we decode it. The CC stands for Common Core Aligned Standard. Nearly all standards in Pennsylvania begin with a CC. Any standard we use in this class later this semester should begin with a CC. Next will be a digit. Number 1 represents English language arts. Again, any standard you use for this class will have a 1 there. The third digit represents the type of English language arts that the standard addresses. Numbers 1 through 5 are all important for you to recognize. However, for this class, anytime we use a standard, we will expect to see a 4 or a 5, writing or speaking and listening. The fourth digit, in this case 4, represents the grade level. Your grade level standard should be the standard that you're teaching. Therefore, if you're working on a mini lesson and it has a 2, I can assume that you're teaching a second grade lesson. And finally, there's a letter at the end. The letter represents the specific expectation. In this case, the specific expectation is to choose words and phrases to convey ideas precisely. That will change for each standard. Let's look again at the third digit. There are 5 areas of English language arts within our standards. It's important that you know the meaning of all 5. But for the purpose of this class, anytime you're citing a standard for a mini lesson or a student goal, recognize that it either should have a 4 for writing or a 5 for speaking and listening. However, I can't stress enough, it's important that you know what all 5 mean. The link for this webpage can be found in the resources area of this week's module of D2L. The academic standards for English language arts in Pennsylvania are listed for grades pre-K through 5. We're going to take a quick look at them. As you scroll through, you'll see an introduction, and then it begins. Notice the 1 stands for English language arts. The point 1 is for foundational skills. That means that for the purposes of this class, we're not going to be referring to this one. But we'll scroll down to the 4s and the writing standards. There we go. You'll see that there are pages and pages of English language arts writing standards, and it's important that we understand and recognize how to find standards in here and how they work. So let's take a look at this one. 1, English language arts. 4, writing. Students write for different purposes and audiences. Students write clear and focused text to convey a well-defined perspective and appropriate content. There are a few things I'm going to point out for you on this page. First, the grades, pre-K through 5th grade. This standard very likely, goes all the way through 12th grade and would continue going to the right, but we're only looking at this link, which gives us grades pre-K to 5. You'll notice that pre-K, it's intentionally left blank. That's because it is not an expectation, but that by the end of the pre-K year, students will be able to do this. It is an expectation that by the end of the kindergarten year, the students will be able to do the things in the kindergarten column. It's an expectation that by the end of 1st grade, they'll be able to do the things in the 1st grade column, and so on. A few other things I want you to recognize here. First, that as the students get older, they progress, but there are not duplicating goals. Therefore, from kindergarten to 1st grade, in kindergarten, the students are expected to capitalize the first word in a sentence and the pronoun I. By the end of 1st grade, they're still expected to do the things listed in kindergarten, but now they're expected to also be able to capitalize dates and names of people, as well as other goals. As you can see, the first few are listed here in the chart for grades K through 2, but grades 3 through 5 have so many specific expectations that they're listed as codes. Notice the E03.D.1.1.1. That specifically will lead us to a code. The Pennsylvania Common Core has been indexed through Google. So if you need to know what E03.D.1.1.1 is, you can Google it. You may have to begin with CC 1.4.3.L and then code this in. If you're finding that you are working with 3rd or 4th grade writing samples and you're looking specifically for a standard, you are very likely to be using an extra code. I also want to point out that on the left-hand side is an extra column. Over here, this refers to opinion or argumentative conventions of language. That's telling you what it is that the standard is addressing. As you scroll down, you'll see that some refer to narrative writing, some refer to narrative focus, narrative content, narrative organization, narrative style, narrative conventions. And then we go down, here's response to literature, and production and distribution of writing process. So each of these standards fits into a more specific category as well. Make sure when you're finding standards that their categories match with what you're teaching. This will make a lot more sense as we go further into different ways of teaching. I also want to show you one additional resource, which is also linked in our module for this week. The Pennsylvania Department of Education has their standards aligned system not only in that grid that we were looking at, but also in a user-friendly online, what I like to call giant cheat sheet. This PDE SAS actually has a login available, and once you're a teacher, you'll be using this often to track your own Pennsylvania Department of Education information. But we're going to go to the standards page. You can view standards here, you can view it in many ways, you can search them, and you can learn about how they align with different things. However, for the purpose of this class, we'll go to search standards. Anytime you're trying to find a standard or trying to find how to teach a standard, you can go here. Let's do a search. Let's say we're searching for a 2nd grade standard. And we want to make sure we're doing English language arts for this class. You'll notice you can use this for other things, like writing in science, writing in history, or even social studies, world language, health, and all the other subjects in school. But for the purpose of this class, we'll use English language arts. Now, we are scrolling through all of the 2nd grade English language arts standards, not in the grid, but in this format. Let's say that I'm looking for a standard about multiple meaning words. I can Control F and type multiple meaning words and come right to the standard. That doesn't always work, but oftentimes it'll help you find a standard quickly. Notice, again, here's the code that we learned earlier. We already know how to decode this, and we know that this is actually not a writing standard because here it has a 2 instead of a 4. So we'll go further and find one with 4s. Here we go. Standard C.1.4.2.A. Write informative explanatory text to examine a topic and convey ideas and information clearly. That's a great standard. I might want to grab that standard, Google it, to find more about teaching that standard. This takes me right back to the PDE SAS, but down below, I'll find more information about teaching to that standard. Another thing I may consider doing is going back to the standards listing. I may want to do with that standard is go back into the PDF with the grid, and I just searched the same standard here. So now I can tell that the standard that I'd found relates to informative and explanatory writing, and that while this is the standard and that it's specifically addressing, and there are no more small details within that. Let's go back. Here we are back at PDE SAS. I also wanted to point out that for this standard, there are assessments available created by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and there are materials and resources and further options. Any of these will provide useful information as you're working through the semester, finding lesson plans and creating short-term goals for students. The purpose of this video was to introduce you to the standards and their history as well, and probably more importantly, to explain how to find standards and how they're used and what their implications are for your teaching. You may want to come back to this video several times this semester as you're navigating your way through the standards and through writing lessons. This video will remain available throughout the semester. This week, you'll also be taking a quiz, and many of the answers will be found within this video. Make sure you understand the areas addressed in the standards and how to decode a standard code. Next, please view the assessment and evaluations video and do the rest of the things in the module for the week.